Hey everyone, Mark Price here at devslopes.com, and I know this is the section you have all been waiting for. We get to talk about core data, and core data is a big deal. It's a big deal in what it can do, and in its learning curve, and in pretty much every other aspect. So, why should you use core data? Okay, so you want to use core data when you want to persist complex data onto your device. So, you got to ask yourself some questions about your app if you need to use core data. Such as, do I need this data to persist offline? And is this data complex enough to warrant use of core data? If you're just doing things like storing, did the screen load or a few little variables here and there, you're free to and fine to use NS user defaults and some other storage methods. Don't go into core data. However, if you have an app that's highly complex and has complex data that you want to store offline, then core data is the right choice for you. But remember, that's the need for offline, okay? If you are completely okay with just downloading data from a server every time your app loads, then don't use core data. Don't use it. Just bring it down locally and keep it there. And a lot of apps do that. There are many, many apps that actually just download data off the internet every single time. And if you don't have internet, you really can't use the app. But in today's world, you'll pretty much always have the internet. So again, the reason why I'm talking about this is because core data is a lot. It's a lot to take in, a lot to put in your project. Once it's in your project, it's hard to remove. Also, if you're using a third-party system like Firebase that has offline syncing and data storage already, you don't need to use core data. So again, core data, you want to use it if you have complex or robust data that you want to store offline. And it doesn't have to necessarily be offline. I mean, you could still download data from the internet and store it into core data and then fetch things locally for speed. So that's another reason as well too. If you need an app that has the most absolute fastest speed in the world for data fetching and retrieving, meaning like when you press a button, you need that data instantly there versus like having to hit a network and wait a couple seconds, then core data might also be a good option for you. And I know there are companies and apps that need that, apps that have to have absolute most responsiveness because of all the data that's coming in and out. So those are some good use cases for core data. I would also highly encourage you not to use core data if you don't need it though, because it's a lot that goes into the app. And also, if you're planning on using like SQLite, if you want to use anything like that in your app and you're planning on it, then use core data. Don't directly interface with the database unless you absolutely have to, because that's a lot more work. Some people will actually implement a SQLite database without core data and they'll write these wrapper layers, maybe like in C++ or something like that, so they can use it on Java and on iPhone. I mean, you can do that as well too. It's very complex. Again, though, if you're going to work with the database, use core data. So that's another thing I would caution you. If you're going to interact with your database, don't access it directly. Use core data because it has a lot of benefits and features. So with that out of the way, okay, just make sure you're not inputting core data in every single app because every single app doesn't call for it. But now it's time to talk about why you should use core data. And let's go to the handy dandy internet. Here's the answer on Stack Overflow as to why you should use core data. Let me expand this here for you. I thought this was a good answer. And in the mouth of 2 or 3 witnesses shall every word be established. So core data will mainly help in the auxiliary facets of the application, things like data persistence, presentation, etc. Some bullet points for your boss. Core data manages save and undo functionality for you. It has a persistent store which tracks changes and can be flushed to the disk automatically at any number of times. If you're writing your own database code, right, could you do undos and saves fairly easily? No, you couldn't. You have to write a lot of code for that. So it handles all that for you. Core data and related classes provide easy ways to get your entities into UI table views like NS Fetched Results Controller. So core data provides means where it maps your SQLite or database entities and objects directly into your app so they could just jump right onto your view, which is really cool. Core data abstracts away a lot of the messy things you'd otherwise have to deal with yourself, such as list of objects, one-to-many or many-to-many relationships, or constraints on object attributes, into a single, nice, clean, object-oriented interface. So what it means is core data makes relationships really easy. You can even drag relationships on the model viewer. You can drag relationships around and actually design it visually, and it manages all those for you. If you had to do that by hand in your app when you're working with the SQLite database, it would be so much work. Okay, again, don't work with a SQLite database directly on iOS. Use core data. Core data comes with a nice graphical object model editor, that's what I was talking about, that you can help you think through your object and entity design as you go along. Okay, so those are some few core points as to why you should use core data. So now that you understand when and why you should use core data, we're going to end this video, and then the next one we're actually going to go through an overview of how core data is put together so you can start getting insight as to how it will work. And it's really important that you understand the theory and the logistics behind everything, because once you get into the code, it's going to start getting complex and you need to understand what's happening underneath the hood. So that's it for now. Mark Price at devslopes.com. Let's dive on in. And remember, to get your free live help, go to devslopes.com and click on the chat room. We have thousands of students in there helping each other out. Also click on the forums. This is where you can search for answers to your code problems, and you can also post your own issues. So head on over now.